Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Cassie Frost. We are thrilled that you're here today.
Thanks, Holly. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm going to introduce you to our watchers and listeners. Cassie Frost is the creator and owner of Disruptive Teaching. She is a licensed educator, speaker, and advocate with over 15 years of experience working with students who learn differently.
That would be correct.
You've been busy.
I have, but I love it.
I love it too.
I love my kids.
So we're going to talk about a very timely topic right now. We're going to talk about ways to successfully transition from remote learning to face-to-face and back and forth. And this is a big deal for so many reasons. We've been in this situation where some children were doing remote learning and then they're transitioned to in-person, and then maybe remote learning and then went out for the holidays and then remained remote before going back. We've got asynchronous days. We've got children that have been remote learning all year and are now sort of transitioning on a system, maybe every couple weeks going back in person. There's so much happening right now. So I'm thrilled that we're talking about this today. It's been a bit of a roller coaster.
I would agree with that. And I think we've got kind of kids across the board that are doing better with different pieces of this.
Definitely. And I've seen that, some of my patients, and again, I serve children with autism and or ADHD, and some of them are thriving with remote learning. They're feeling less anxious. They are less overwhelmed. They are actually doing better socially because they feel more comfortable even using that chat box. Have you found that as well?
I would agree. And I think it kind of depends completely on the student. We've got some students who really thrive with that social interaction, and they really need all of that going on and the movement to be able to focus on their classes. And for them, this e-learning is really, really difficult. For some of our students who, the whole social piece is overwhelming and there's so much going on and all of the hidden rules and social situations that they're uncomfortable with, when they're e-learning, those are gone. And they can focus on school and they can have the social interactions that they choose to have that are scheduled. They pull up a meeting. It's not a surprise. So we have students on both ends, and we have some that are doing phenomenally like this. They like the control of e-learning. They like being able to set up their own environments. They like the loss or lack of that extra social stuff. It's not as tiring. So yeah, we definitely have kids on both sides of this.
Definitely. And I've seen the same. Again, I mentioned children I work with are doing really well. And then there's some are suffering and really even experiencing increased depression and anxiety because they haven't been around their peers and their teachers. So let's talk about how to do this whole transition part. You have put together great 8 ways to make this transition more successful. So let's talk about number 1, which is communication between teachers and parents.
So this is going to be key. One of the things that we've seen as kids are learning from home is parents have had to become much more immersed in what their students are doing during the school day. So I have a daughter who's almost 17, and we have this, habit of she comes home from school and, you ask about a student's day. Right? That's normal. You ask about your student's day, how did things go? And typically what they're going to tell you is about their friends, their lunch, maybe something, horrific that happened. Usually it's the high highs and the low lows is what they're going to share with you. When students have been learning at home now, all of a sudden, parents are really super involved in, is math done? Is English done? Is science done? What's going on in all of these areas. So I think as students are moving back into the classroom or back and forth and back, is really taking that time to keep that communication going between the parents and the teachers. So now parents are kind of more aware of the day-to-day academic stuff, and teachers are learning how to communicate that with parents as well. And so as they're coming back into the school buildings, it's really important to keep that connection going. for a few reasons. One, it's just great for academics. Two, there's going to be some anxiety for a lot of students about coming back, even if they're super excited. There's a lot of stuff on the news. There's stuff being talked about in grocery stores, at home, and students are going to be picking up on a lot of that. So it's going to be really important for parents and teachers to talk not only about the academics, not only about the schedule, not only making sure that things are consistent across environments, but also making sure that the messaging that they have is consistent and on the same page. Regardless of your anxiety about your students returning to school or teachers' anxiety, it's really important that everybody in the child's life has a really positive message. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to do what we can to make this transition smooth, really looking at the positive things. If seeing their friends is positive, that's what we want to talk about. If being back in the classroom to do hands-on projects is a positive, we want to make sure we're talking about that, because kids on their own are going to have anxiety regardless. So it's our job to kind of bring that around and keep that communication open and make sure that we're having those conversations with each other.
I really like that. And really all having a similar goal, to be safe, to be learning. And we can all get behind that.
I would agree. And it's really easy if that communication breaks down for one party to not know what the other one is saying, or for the one to not know what the expectations are for the student. So while, parents are not going to be, emailing teachers every day, talking with them every day, but checking in with your students, seeing how they're feeling, emailing the teacher if you have any questions or if you have any concerns. If this was said, asking the teacher, okay, what was the context? And really assuming that both parties have the best of intents. Because of this environment, it's really easy to have that feeling that, not everybody's on the same page, because you're hearing bits and pieces, or the students saying one thing or coming home with something. Really, both parties making sure that they're assuming that, teachers are assuming parents are doing the very best they can to get their students back in a positive situation, and parents doing the same with their teachers. Their teachers are there doing the best they can, trying to get the students back in a positive way. And keeping that positive regard back and forth and communicating is going to be key to this whole process. Because at some point, we might be going right back to virtual or right back face to face. So,
and that's why it's so important we're talking about this.
Absolutely.
Okay, so number 2, hang on to what methods that worked during remote learning.
So this kind of seems odd, because we automatically, I think, start assuming there's nothing good about this, right?
Yeah.
But like we talked at the beginning, for some students, this worked well. And even for students who this didn't work ideally for, there are still some good things, I'm guessing, that have come out of this. I don't think I've talked to a single family or student that hasn't had something positive. So whether that's they found a quiet place in the corner of their bedroom with a beanbag that works really well for reading. Like when they have a reading assignment, that just feels comfortable for them and it goes really well. Let's keep that place there so that when they come home and they have homework, they can go there. Making sure that any types of check-ins with your students. So checking in at the end of the day, I'm guessing with e-learning, and I know even with my daughter at the end of the day, because the day doesn't always end at the same time when you're e-learning, right? Is, how did your day go? How did this class go? What do you need to do yet? And making sure we're still asking those exact same questions so that our students know we're still following up on what's going on and they're feeling that comfort. Kind of the environments that our students are learning in. So as this became a longer thing and not just a couple of weeks at home, most families have found some area for their student to work. And just like you have a work area, Holly, and I have a work area, our students are developing work areas at home. So whether that's a corner of the kitchen table, whether it's a certain spot on the couch with a nice lamp next to it, really trying to continue to have that learning space at home. So, not getting excited, like, oh, wow, my student's going back to school, I can take over my couch again. Still keeping that space, primarily because, again, if we do go back and forth, the student might need it again, or for homework time, that space is there. So really keeping those things at home that worked really, really, really well. And then at school also, as teachers talking to your parents and finding out what went well at home. Did your student do better if they had, a 5-minute break before they started doing this activity? Did it work better if you had a checklist for them? Did it work better if they sat by a window? What things worked at home for your student to be successful, and as much as possible, bringing those into the classroom. Now, we know not everything is going to be possible. Having your puppy on your lap at school isn't going to work as much as we would love, but the things that we can, hang on to, try to keep those, the positives that are there going strong.
Definitely. I love that. And like you said, there are some positive things about this, even if it feels
Sure.
like for some families that there aren't. I know for our family, there have been, even though that it's been difficult. I'm thinking about our 16-year-old in particular, about missing seeing other kids and all of those things. He's also gotten his cozy spot and he's gotten his routine down and he's got his fidgets next to him and all those other things. So we're going to try to kind of mesh those as best we possibly can.
That's
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. That's actually something that's really interesting, because one thing that my daughter picked up was an app that is like a decision wheel. And so when she's feeling overwhelmed or stuck, she'll actually put like all of the tasks she needs to do on the day on the wheel and then spin it. And whatever she lands on is what she does next.
That
And
is really cool.
it's awesome. I've actually used it myself some days. But it really helps keep her kind of moving from thing to thing. And she's already been talking about now, when she's going back to school, putting all of her different homework tasks on there. So when you get home, it doesn't feel like this never ending list. It's just, it might be a snack and then this. And so kind of just those little things. There are little things that have been successful.
Definitely. Okay, number 3, accessible content and assistive technology.
So this is kind of my pet project here. Really kind of paying attention to what your student's doing that's working online or in person. But a lot of our students in the classroom kind of either have, they sit and they watch the board, or they watch a video, or they watch their teacher, or maybe they do an assignment on the computer. We don't always spend the time looking at assistive technology for every student, right? We definitely have certain students with IEPs and things that we look at assistive technology. But as we've been going to remote learning and online learning, students have had to depend on assistive technology much more. So a student in the past who maybe struggled with reading may have a peer that sits next to them that reads something to them when they get stuck, or an assistant that does, or a teacher that does. When a student's learning from home, they may not have that adult or that peer right there able to read for them. So we have students who are depending on things like text to speech much more heavily. Or we have students who have taken the time to explore their devices, and they've figured out that they learn better when their text is enlarged and they have larger font on their screen. So making sure now that we're kind of starting to look at what are they doing when they're using their computer, what are they using that's allowing them to learn well? And then as we're going back into the classrooms, making sure that we're communicating, there's that step number 1 again, with the teachers and with the school, what's working well, so that the students now that have customized this experience for themselves and what works, that they can carry that over into the classrooms. So having those conversations about text to speech, speech to text, are we enlarging our screens? Are we changing our fonts? What are we doing to be able to access our content at home when kids have had to be a lot more independent? And then how can we bring those things into the classroom?
I really like that. And again, it all sort of stacks together as well. When you're thinking about the technology, something that we've done for our son, who, like I mentioned, our oldest son, he will go back, he kind of has a home base, a tech home base, where he goes back into the curriculum assistance class. And the teacher who runs that class is the special education master, and she really understands students. And so if he's feeling overwhelmed, if he really needs to check in, he has the freedom to be able to go over in that class and check in. And so really wanting to, once he goes back in person, do the same thing. That way he has that home base to get what he needs, be able to calm himself if need be, and he knows he has a safe place to go.
Absolutely. Those types of things, while they kind of seem like maybe small things or just things we're doing to just get through right now, actually are things that our students can use long term. And the skills that you're talking about there, Holly, of the independence of recognizing, wait a second, I need help, here's where I can go. Those are skills that he's going to use for the rest of his life. And so while e-learning hasn't been phenomenal for a lot of students, or there's been struggles, this use of technology in a way that is so customized to each student is really something that's going to benefit them as they are moving into their adult years and aren't going to necessarily be surrounded with the human supports at all times.
That's true. That's definitely true. So, number 4, find ways to continue to provide opportunities for independence and choice.
Do you notice these just kind of all go together here? We just
They do, yes.
independence, and here we are. So we know that as adults, as people, we need control. We need control of our environments. We need control of our world. And when we don't feel like we have control over anything, we start to feel very stressed. And right now, our students have lost control of a lot. They've lost control of when they can see their friends, asking their teacher for help, navigating in the hallways, what books they can pick out in the library, right? So much has changed all of a sudden. So now that we've been in this e-learning, asynchronous, synchronous, back and forth, our students are kind of getting used to this. And they're recognizing that at certain points, they have a little bit, they have control in different areas with this. So for some students, if it's not a synchronous course, so if it's an asynchronous thing, they can look at their coursework for the day and pick, are they going to do math first or are they going to do English first? They can decide, are they going to work from the couch or are they going to work from their desk today? Are they going to listen to the book on YouTube or on, the school platform, or are they going to read it? They have a lot of choice in their learning right now. And for some students, that's really hard, but it has given them more control over what they're doing and when they're doing it. Now, those same students, when they go back to the classroom, that same level of control isn't able to be there. You can't really look at a student in junior high or in elementary school or high school even and say, okay, well, today, do you want to do English first or do you want to do math first? Right? There's a schedule that students need to follow. And so they're going to lose some of the control that they've held on to during this time. This time, that control has become really important to them. Whether they recognize it or not, because it's one of the only things they can control right now is some of those learning environment things. So as we're moving back into the classroom, really helping your students know what can they still have choice in. They might not be able to choose, can they go back to school today? Now they can't be back in school. Is today e-learning or is today synchronous? They're going to lose a lot of that. So what can you give them control over? So things like the assistive technology, can they control their web and browser and their environment? Can they control where they sit? When they go back to school, can they choose whether to do it handwriting on a piece of paper or go back to the screen? Because we're going to have students that want both. So as much as possible, still offering those choices. And they don't always need to be huge. It can be, do you guys want to work with the lights on or the lights off in class today? Because it's nice out and the windows are open. Do you want, just giving those small choices so students still feel some ownership and control of what they can do? It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge for our students. And it doesn't have to be huge things, but making sure they have some choice.
I love that, because you said it doesn't have to be all the control, but there are so many ways that we can provide those choices.
And I think that's always kind of key, that it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be some huge thing like, do you want to do English or math first? It can be, do you want to work alone or with a partner? Do you want to fill this out in pencil or pen? Do you want to do this with speech to text or do you want to type? They can all be little things, but really still kind of showing students that we know that they have developed some of these skills and that they are independent learners, and they've shown that in these last months. So kind of honoring that and showing them that they still can have control over some of these things.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, number 5, create a calendar and schedule for the transition phase.
So if I asked you what was in your house right now, and Holly, you're my person I'm talking to here, I would guess you have a calendar somewhere. Would I be right?
Yes, but Cassie, and to all the listeners and watchers, I would like to say I'm more organized than I am. For instance, the other day, I'm like, what? It's an asynchronous day? What? I had to remember that because I had forgotten with all these different changes. But yes, I do. I have a calendar on my phone. I have a printed out calendar for my oldest son. My youngest son knows his schedule and his tutoring schedule. So yes, we do have calendars.
Okay, and you just kind of proved my point there, Holly. So obviously you have a calendar, you know that you need it, you use it,
Yes.
you're using it, and you know when it doesn't go well, how you felt, right? You had that anxiety. I didn't know it was an asynchronous day, and you had that anxiety that kind of suddenly showed up because you didn't expect it. So the same thing with our students. If they don't know that today is an asynchronous day, or today's a face-to-face day, or today's a half day, that's going to all increase anxiety. So as much as possible, having a schedule, making those things visuals for students so that they can know what's coming next. They can kind of start prepping. If your school district is going to be going back face-to-face in a week, start talking with your students about that. Put that date on the calendar. Make it something to look forward to. Same thing as much as possible if you know that it's going to be going back and forth, right? Because we have some that maybe do 2 days face-to-face, 3 days e-learning. Putting that on a calendar so that a student knows without question what's coming next. And then within that, both at school and at home, having kind of an outline of what your student's day is going to look like. So if your student's going to be in class, again, working with the teachers, what is the day going to look like at school? Because again, it's going to be very different than what their day looked like at home. So starting to front load, this is what your day at school is going to look like. Here's where things may change. And putting that out, it doesn't have to be pretty. Some students really respond well to a beautiful, colored schedule with stickers and pictures. And some students literally, I worked with a speech and language pathologist who was absolutely amazing. And she used to always tell me, like, this is a visual, just jot it down on a Post-it note and it's there. So you have to kind of know your student and what's going to work best for them, but really starting to block out both a long-term, like monthly or weekly calendar, and then also kind of a daily schedule. Because as students are moving back and forth or into these different environments, it lets them know what's coming next. And it eliminates kind of that anxiety, Hallie, of, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was coming. Now I'm not prepared for it.
Yes, and you had mentioned, which leads us into another of your tips, those visuals, like loading, visuals. So let's talk about that.
There we go. We can just jump kind of around here a little bit. Visuals are key. And when we talk about our students, we sometimes, I think, not always, but I think as parents, as teachers, as professionals, sometimes we forget how heavily we rely on visuals in our world. So if you look around at your world right now, as you're watching or listening to this, how many visuals are around you right now? I'm looking around my office right now. I've got Post-it notes, going on. I've got my calendar next to me. I've got a calendar on my computer. I have a book that I need to read sitting up here, so I remember it, because if I put it in a cupboard, I will completely forget it. But if the book's sitting out, I will remember it. I need to write a check out for something, so I have my checkbook sitting on my desk, because then I will remember it. We have all these visuals in place, but we don't always call them visuals. We'll say things like, oh, out of sight, out of mind, or we'll say, yep, I need that checklist, but we don't necessarily call them visuals. So now if we put that into our students' worlds, what can we provide for visuals for them? When students are in the classroom, face-to-face, all year round, they're surrounded by visuals. Teachers are naturally good at this, right? There's posters up on the wall. If a student's in a math class, there's likely a poster somewhere that's showing, the plus symbol and the minus and the division symbol. Those are there so students can see them and practice them and remember them. Most classrooms have a big calendar on the wall that's showing when specials are and what you need, what day is library, for example. And all of those visuals are just surrounding them all day. When students came home, a lot of those visuals were missing, and parents found ways to handle that, right? We started making Post-it note for our kids. We printed out schedules. We started surrounding some of those visuals, maybe setting out math books if the student had to work on math so they didn't forget about it. So now as we're going back into school, how can we ensure that the visuals that worked at home are coming into school? And how can our teachers be aware of what visuals have been working and what additional visuals that student might need? So for example, at the end of a day, putting a Post-it note, even just on a student's desk saying, remember, tomorrow's an asynchronous day, will really help cue that student at the end of the day to grab the stuff they need at home for home learning that next day. So instead of always giving all of the audio content at students, visuals are key. And again, part of that is just our processing. When there's a lot going on in our heads, the audio doesn't always come through as well. So having that visual there really helps kind of get that stuck in students' heads and allows them to look back at it. So they don't have to try to hang on to their schedule. What do they need to bring? What's coming next? What do I need for this assignment? So really, when there's all of the extra anxiety and change in a student's world, the more we can put visuals in will really help support.
Absolutely. I love that you said that because oftentimes we communicate with our words and we assume that there is this taken in of words and remembering. We know a lot of our students struggle with working memory and processing speed, and those things can be really hard for them. So using visuals is incredibly important to support them. For our oldest, I buy pencils in bulk because he sometimes fidgets with them and breaks them, not thinking he's just fidgeting.
Mhm.
So we've got lots of those, and they're right next to him. Having his schedule next to him. My youngest, our 11-year-old, all his tutoring books, everything he needs is in one place. He knows exactly where they are and where to get them. And so we, really have been working on, with the exception of the asynchronous day that I forgot, been really trying to use those visuals. And I love when teachers are bringing them into the classroom. And again, parents have had this very interesting experience of being very much in their child's learning life, even more so than before. And what a great way to, again, we talked about communicate between the parent and teacher about what's working.
Absolutely. And, especially as your students get older, another thing to start thinking about as students are going back and forth and, they don't have one instructor, because I'm going to call parents instructors at this point. They don't have the same instructor all week, right? So they're with their teacher face to face, maybe 2 days, and maybe they're home with parents 3 days. So sometimes it's hard to keep those visuals consistent and how they're being created. So as your students are getting older too during this time, this is a great way to bring in some of that choice and control and start teaching students how to make their own visuals. So maybe we've had students use things like maybe Google Slides to put in pictures of things that they need to remember for the next day. Or we have students that, just have blocks on paper and they draw something for each class, reminding them of what they need to do next. So it can be fun. It doesn't have to be some formal calendar or planner. But as we're moving forward, it's a great time to start encouraging students to make their own visuals, even if they're just post-it notes everywhere.
I like that. Definitely. And again, that goes back to teaching those skills, those executive functioning skills, right? How they can be more independent. And that's definitely something they'll need to bring with them into adulthood. So
Absolutely.
let's, yeah. So let's look at number 7, practice social situations and mask wearing.
So we talked earlier about the fact that our students aren't in as social of an environment anymore. They're just not. And so not that the students necessarily have forgotten how to do those, but they're out of practice. I think I'm out of practice sometimes, and it's different. I've noticed even I'll go into a building and I'll smile at somebody, which I used to always do as kind of a hi, how are you? And they'll give me a funny look and keep walking. I've just realized they can't see my smile under my mask. I mean, these are all kind of new and unique social situations. So start talking with your students about those, start practicing those. Some students may respond really well to actually doing live role playing. Some students, as they get older, are going to think that's really kind of goofy. And so that's where, you can start having students encourage them, okay, maybe jump on a Zoom call with a friend tonight. And just so they can start practicing kind of that back and forth, that reciprocal question and asking and answering process, so that when they go back into school, they don't have that anxiety over those social situations quite as much, because we've been increasing it again, starting to do more of those Zoom calls. If you've got family members that you're comfortable with, being outside with, doing something in that manner so that they're getting more familiar with those things and kind of practicing those skills that maybe we haven't used as much recently, right? And then
Definitely.
along with that, the mask part. I mean, just like me trying to smile at people and they think I'm crazy because I'm just staring at them and they can't see my smile, right? Kind of practicing wearing a mask. How do you wear a mask? When do you wear a mask? Is it okay to take it off while I'm eating? Making sure that we're communicating that with students and practicing, and even starting to build a tolerance of how long we wear them for. Because when students are back in the building, they're going to be wearing masks all day at this point. So how long can they wear it? When does it bother them? What can they do if their mask is bothering them? Is it appropriate to be able to itch your nose with it? Kind of all of those hidden rules that can cause a lot of anxiety. Now's the time to be practicing those.
And I think that is a good point. Again, going back to the parent-teacher communication, is some schools will have mask breaks when they go outside. I mean, everyone's doing things a little bit different, so it's great to have that communication. That way, parents can prepare their children, and then there's less confusion for the educator when they come back. Again, another great reason to be talking about what is expected.
And
All
that's a
right.
good thing to practice. I mean,
Yeah,
when goes outside, have them put a mask on for 15 minutes, but then when they go out, they can take it off. So they kind of get in that habit.
exactly. And if the opportunity arises, even trying different ones,
Mhm.
being able to see, maybe there's a preference. Maybe a child feels like they like this mask better, if it's breathable or if it's cool. Because there never would I think, Cassie, that there would be fashion with mask wearing.
There is, there
Maybe,
definitely is.
yes, maybe it's Minecraft or Pikachu or whatever. So, there's a lot of things that a lot of ways we can make it more comfortable for children. So, last but not least, start migrating the home routine to more of a school schedule.
This one can be painful. I'm fully aware this one can be painful, but if you have an asynchronous day with your students, most parents, especially over this long of a period, we've kind of lightened up on what time we get up in the morning or what time we start learning. And maybe, we take a couple hour of break during the middle of the day and we do more of the reading stuff in the evening. And that's been part of that ownership and that flexibility that this has allowed, which is phenomenal. But as your students are starting to go back face to face, it's really important to start building back into that school routine. I kind of liken this to a lot of parents, kind of that whole in August, right? In August, a lot of parents will start talking about getting their students ready for the school year. If their students are getting up at 9 o'clock, the next week it'll be 8:30, the next week it'll be 8, but starting to push that back. So on the first day of school, it's not this shock and battle to try to get your student up and out the door. So practicing more of a school routine. It doesn't have to be exact, but if your student, has English first, then math, and they know that, maybe that English is hard for your student, start working with them on doing it first in the morning. So, okay, we're going to do this class first because when you go to school, this is going to be your first class. So we can practice that. So it's not a shock. Because again, as they're coming back, the last thing we want is this sudden realization that they have to do a class they hate maybe first hour. And now the whole experience of going back to school is awful. And so communicating with the teachers about what their day is going to look like, and then slowly starting to make your home learning experience match up closer. It's never going to be exact, but if your student's used to eating lunch at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but their school lunch is at 11, that's going to be really difficult because they're not going to be hungry at 11. And at 1, they're going to be hungry and not able to focus. So starting to try to move things like lunches, time outside, start and stop times, getting closer to that school schedule really help ease that transition back and forth.
Oh, that is such a good tip. Thank you so much, Cassie, for joining us. We are excited to have you. We've talked about so many great tips to make transitions more successful. So I know our watchers and listeners are going to want to learn more about you. So how do they do that?
So I'm always available via email. We were talking a little bit before our podcast today. Email is kind of my to-do list. So if you email me, I will get back to you. And that's just going to be cfrost@disruptive-teaching.com. And that's also then my website. So Disruptive Teaching, there's that little hyphen in between the two, websites and the way they work. And you'll find there I do blog posts and post about where I'm going to be speaking and stuff on there as well.
Perfect. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yes, definitely. We will have those links to you, and then that way they'll be able to find you.
That would be awesome.
Okay, Cassie, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks so much, Holly.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.